All right. Well, welcome everybody to session 2 of the Emerging Leaders Civic Advancement Training Program. Excited to have everybody back. I'm going to keep my eye on the waiting room. So if you drop out and have to come back in, I'll go ahead and get you back in on the training. And if you do have any questions, if you would please go ahead and any questions or comments, we're going to call on you today, just like we have been in the last training sessions last week, but feel free to respond in the chat box. And again, if you could, just with the number of people that we have here, just keep yourself muted so to block out the background noise so we can kind of focus on today's topic. Sound good? All right. Well, my name is James Kernan. I'll be one of the co-presenters today. And my good friend and colleague, Allie Chang, is with us. Hello, Allie.
Hello, James.
How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. It's very nice in St. Louis today, so the sun is out. Very different from yesterday.
Yeah, it's gorgeous here in Nebraska, that's for sure. Fall is here, so beautiful, beautiful day.
All right. Well, I with James then am really glad that you're all back with us today. We're going to continue on our agenda with talking about leadership and its intersection with community work. So we will talk a little bit about just the leadership certification requirements. As you all know, this is a 5-week challenge, and depending on what your completion rate is, there's 2 levels of certification. So James will be able to speak to that a little bit more, just to remind you of those requirements.
Yeah.
But then James is also going to continue to talk with you about leadership development. James, what are some of those topics that you'll be covering today?
So we're going to go right back into leadership. We're going to talk about creativity. We're going to talk about innovation. We're going to talk about core values. We're going to talk about strategic thinking. So some important aspects of leadership.
Awesome. Well, and I'm going to build on what James is going to be speaking about regarding the values section. And so hopefully that'll align right up as we get ready for Thursday's then discussion, where we'll even talk more about providing service based on your personal values and beliefs. And then we'll wrap up.
Great. And today's session, it probably won't go quite 90 minutes. We're going to try to give you back maybe 15, 20 minutes of your day. Today's session will be a little bit shorter than last Monday's.
All right, so just as a reminder then, you all are joining James and I for 5 weeks because we are really hoping to be able to advance your skills by providing you some training, but also some skill development so that you'll emerge at the end of the 5 weeks. And hopefully you'll stay with us till the end of the 5 weeks to be grounded in what we call integrity and agility. Right? And we believe that if you are able to build your skills in that will make you more resilient as leaders. And if you're more resilient, then you'll have the ability to positively influence others. And with those new gained skills, then you'll increase your engagement in the community, both civically and socially. All right, and then just as a reminder, this is our path forward. So today we're on Tuesday, October 13th. So as James said, we're scheduled till 2:30, but it's possible we may give you back some time this afternoon. But we are looking forward then to seeing you again on October 15th on Thursday from 1 to 2. And that's our discussion where we'll really dive into a little bit more of that intersection of community and leadership. And then we've got weeks 3, 4, and 5 ahead of us. And so that's just the schedule. Hopefully you all have calendar reminders that are embedded if you use electronic calendaring.
Yep. Great. Well, let me start with today's content, Allie. I'm going to just kind of jump into leadership. So last week's lesson was really the foundation of leadership, and we talked about what great leaders look like, right? We talked about some mentors in your life and some of the key characteristics of leadership. And today is really kind of part 2 of that, where I want to talk a little bit more about creativity and innovation and build on some of the additional leadership skills as it pertains back to all of you. So I love this quote from Albert Einstein. When I think of Albert Einstein, I think of intelligence, strategic thinking, a visionary. He just was a great man in history. And I love this picture creativity is intelligence having fun, right? That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about creativity and innovation. So in the chat box, if you would, tell me what you think creativity or innovation is. And maybe tell me if you think that's important. Go ahead and just type out in the chat box. I think it's important, and I'll tell you why here in just a few minutes. We're going to walk through some of this. But I'd like to think about, so creativity, innovation. Okay, yep. I love it. Thinking outside the box. You're not constricted to linear thinking. We're certainly going to be talking about that. Those are some good examples. There's some great ones. Look at that, Allie. So creativity is really the ability to develop and express ourselves and our ideas in new ways, in different ways. And to me, there's no one more creative person than Albert Einstein. It's really going beyond the usual, maybe into the unusual, but stepping outside the box. And several of you maybe heard me say that last week. We're going to certainly talk a lot more about that this week and some outside the box thinking. But innovation is really the implementation of something new. So it's a little bit different. So creativity is really the thoughts and ideas, and innovation is the implementation of something new, like a new method or idea or product. And we're going to need to innovate here for the combined federal campaign this year, with many of you having virtual campaigns. We're certainly going to need to think outside the box, right? So innovation is really the implementation of something new, and creativity is related to the imagination. Does that make sense? You following
Yeah,
with
that's
me?
really interesting.
Okay. So let's talk about ways that you can make space for creativity and innovation. Okay, in your office. So I think this is important. You want to create an environment that enables people to be creative. And when I talk about environment, I'm talking about culture. The office. You want ideas, you want creative thoughts and innovation. And it's so easy in today's world when somebody thinks outside the box and says something different, for you to shut them down, or somebody else to shut them down. Again, that's just kind of the programming of the world to razz each other and tease each other. And it's a little bit okay to me if you do that a little bit, but I think it's important that you create an environment that's encouraging. You want to encourage people to do that, right? I think it's important also to define what innovation is for your organization or for your department, for your campaign. What's the definition of innovation for you, and help explain that to people so they really understand. I think it's also important to ask for ideas. Okay, you want to create that environment that enables and let people, proactively share, but you want to, in some cases, you need to pull that out of people as well. So asking for ideas, I think it's important just to get people talking. We all got people like that in our office. You want to make sure that you're pulling ideas out of people. And I think it's also important for them to see that you're trying to implement, maybe as one of the leaders in the organization or for your campaign, for your office, try to implement some of those ideas, okay? And provide guidance of what you're looking for. Kind of maybe some ground rules, give some ideas to let other people's creativity get rolling, and then give the employees, give your team members the freedom to create. I like scheduling meetings and having a dedicated meeting where you could have a brainstorming session, or maybe there's the old school is like the suggestion box on the wall that you made in shop class, and you have it mounted up on the wall. Those are good ways, but you want to just create that environment, keep it encouraging so people are inspired to speak up. I remember what it was like growing up in the Midwest. I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and there's a 5-year gap in between me and my closest brother. So any opportunity I had to speak up, I had to dodge fists or feet, trying to discourage me, I guess, in so many ways of speaking up, because I was so much younger than my older brothers and sisters. Sometimes that makes it challenging. So don't be like that. You want to encourage that conversation. So I wanted to share a little bit and get you thinking about some famous American innovators in history. You know, there's so many great examples. You know, Benjamin Franklin was fantastic. Elijah McCoy, Thomas Edison, you know, Henry Ford. I love Henry Ford stuff. The Wright brothers, you know, Albert Einstein. We talked about him just a minute ago. So there's some great examples of innovation. And this chart really only kind of goes up to 1965. So start thinking about some of the other ones since then. You know, who are some of the other great ones? Maybe in the chat box, just go ahead and write down any comments that you have of who are some famous innovators in history that you like, that you admire. It could be Elon Musk, you know, Jeff Bezos, you know, Steve Jobs. You know, Walt Disney was one of my favorite ones. You know, growing up, it was kind of the era of all the cartoons. Okay, he just revolutionized the film industry by really creating cartoons. His story is quite amazing, and you know, the cartoons originally were just drawings. And if you remember, maybe as a kid, flipping through the drawings really quick, and you can see the animation moving. Now they do it all on computers, so it's just amazing. So I see some great ones coming in chat. Nikola Tesla, Isaac Newton, a couple more from Tesla, Walt Disney, Mr. Rogers, love Mr. Rogers, Steve Jobs. So there's some good ones there for sure. So another one, I just want to share a quick story. How many of you, maybe a quick show of hands for those of you that have your camera on, how many of you have really read the story of Colonel Sanders? Okay. I hope everybody loves good fried chicken. And he had created one of the most famous chicken recipes of all time. But he also had a series of failures in his life. And it's really interesting if you read his story. You know, his father died when he was 5. You know, he got married at a young age, couldn't hold a job, all sorts of family tragedies. I think his wife left him when he was 20 years old. He tried to kidnap his son, and ultimately talked his wife into coming back to him later in his life. But he really had a lot of struggles. And to me, it's quite amazing to see such a talented man from birth all the way up to the age of 65. And at the age of 65, listen to this, he retires. And he felt like he was a failure in life. And he got a check, a government subsidy check, when he retired, the first month he retired at the age of 65. And the check was $105. And he felt that that was a slap in his face. And he actually wanted to take his own life, because he said, the government doesn't need to take care of me now. You know what, I'm just going to end it. So he was sitting underneath a big oak tree, and he was writing out his will. And he was thinking back of all the things that he woulda, coulda, shoulda done. And he started looking at all the things that he didn't do, that he still kind of wants to do. And he ended up, fortunately, talking himself out of it. I guess he took an $87 loan off of the $105 check. And he basically created a door-to-door chicken sales network, where he would go door to door with his neighbors, and he would sell fried chicken to his neighbors. And obviously that really took off. And to me, the most powerful part of this is not that he got back on track, but from that moment when he started the door to door, then he opened his first restaurant, and he really became the brand ambassador of the company. And before he ultimately retired a second time, he built this into a $1 billion empire. So what a great example of perseverance, of innovation, and just thinking outside the box. Who would think of going door to door selling fried chicken, right? So I thought that was interesting. I just wanted to share that inspiring story with everybody. So let me kind of segue into strategic thinking. So we talked a little bit about creativity, and that's really, the ideas, and the innovation is really how to implement that, right? So let's talk a little bit more about strategic thinking, because I think that's an important piece of this before I dive into vision. That's the next topic I want to talk about. So what is strategic thinking for you? Feel free to go ahead and you could type in chat if you have a description or definition of what you think strategic thinking is. It can mean a lot of different things to different people. And I think strategic thinking is very important with all the things going on in the world. Okay. Having a plan of action, deep thoughts, pros and cons. Excellent. I like that. Planning out the years, stepping back, looking into the future. Love that. Exactly. It's really the ability to plan for the future, to me. That's what I think it is. Looking at the big picture. Perfect. So let's kind of dig into strategic thinking. Don't you all agree that strategic thinking is really an important part of leadership, right? I would hope everybody would agree with that. So strategic thinking is really the process that defines the way people think about, assess, view, and create the future for themselves and others, right? It's more of a forward-looking concept. So I want to share a little bit of some 3 quick strategic secrets about thinking. So strategic thinking, number 1, obviously think big, think deep, and think in time. So it's kind of the 3 different dimensions there. And I'll share 4 rules of strategic thinking, and we'll talk about this a little bit. So strategic thinking really seeks hard, fact-based information. So when you are sitting down and thinking strategically about something and working on a plan for the future, to me, one of the first things that you really need to dig into is factual information. You need as much data as humanly possible, right? So trending data, maybe if you're running a campaign for your office, you want to take a look at the historical results. How many donors have we had year over year? Where did the donors come from? How much volunteer hours did we have, or how much revenue did we create for the campaign in our office campaign? So kind of think of some simple things like that, but it's all really based on data and trends. And in some cases, you might have some predictive information that you could use. But I would actually take a look at as much possible information that you can get your hands on, and then kind of start with that as the foundation. Number 2, strategic thinking really questions everyone's unquestioned assumptions. Okay, so questions everyone's unquestioned assumptions. So just don't take things for granted just because everybody says that's the way it is. It's an opportunity to think outside the box, right? We talked about that. I don't know how many of you, I'm a movie buff and love reading books and so forth, but I don't know how many of you had seen the movie, came out a few years back, called World War Z with Brad Pitt. So again, maybe a little off color or off topic movie, but Brad Pitt, just a fantastic author, and it was really about this zombie apocalypse that hit the world, right? So it's all about zombies. And one thing I thought was just fascinating that really plays right into this is, so he was really an investigator for the World Health Organization to go out and figure out where this whole disease started. And one of the things he quickly uncovered as the movie started was when the zombies attacked all these different countries, Israel was the only country that had the forthright to create a wall all the way around their country. And they made a safe zone inside the land of Israel. And he was so fascinated by that, he went there and really uncovered, he was asking questions about, well, how did you come up with this? And they had a rule that was called the 10th man rule. And the 10th man, so it was like a strategic advising team of 10 advisors that were looking at any opportunities, any challenges, any threats to Israel. And it was regardless if everybody agreed 100%, it was the 10th man's responsibility to think outside the box and to oppose it, no matter how ridiculous their thoughts were or comments or their logic was. It was the responsibility of that 10th person. And I just thought that was interesting thinking because they couldn't debunk that 10th person's argument. And so they started preparing for the zombie apocalypse, and subsequently it helped them, at least for part of the movie. So I just thought that was an interesting example to kind of bring back outside the box strategic thinking about the 10th man rule. I was pretty blown away by that. So the third rule is strategic thinking is characterized by an all-pervasive unwillingness to expend resources. So what I mean by that is you want to win, but not at all costs. You want to win and accomplish the goal. You want to accomplish the vision with the use of minimal resources, right? Minimal dollars or minimal resources. So that should be part of your strategic thinking. Think of it more like efficiency. You want to accomplish the goal as efficient as possible, okay? So I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. And the fourth one is really strategic thinking is the unusually direct and unexpected rather than the head-on and predictable. And again, it's kind of just thinking outside the box. Don't take everything for granted. And here's an interesting quote from a military strategist. It's, in strategy, the longest way around is often the shortest way home. Okay, so it's a little bit of a mind twister there, but we've got to get kind of the outside the box thinking going to really accomplish the goal. So that was the number 4. So kind of to make my point, I thought this graph really explained things pretty well. So if this pie chart represented 100% of all possible knowledge, okay, so 100% of all possible knowledge, the green sliver, okay, the green sliver is things that you realize you know. Okay, so we're capable of so much more, but just to put things in perspective, the reality is that's what things would look like. And the red part are things that you realize you don't know. Okay, and those two sections kind of make up your total awareness. And some are larger than others based on who you are. But my whole point is the overwhelming majority of knowledge are things you don't realize that you don't know. Okay, and it's an important visual to really realize that it's the land of opportunity. I think it's important, involve as much data as you can, like we talked about, and involve as many credible resources and team members as possible to give you input, because that's where you're going to get the additional information from these other people, right? I think that's important to look at it this way. And here's a case in point. I don't know how many of you remember the story years back, but it was a story about a father, and he's driving his little boy, his young son, and they're driving down the road, and they got caught in this really terrible traffic accident. And they kind of look up way ahead, and they saw a bunch of suits walking around with yellow hats. So they were just curious, and they get out and they start walking up. Well, lo and behold, as they get closer to the accident scene, there's all these squad cars, flashing lights going on. But there was a truck that had gotten stuck underneath a bridge. That obviously it was too big to get underneath the bridge. And I guess the bridge was like a railroad bridge. But the truck had become lodged there, and it had been stuck there for like an hour. And so all these executives of the company were there trying to figure out a way to, hey, how do we get this out? And it was the little boy who looked up and said, have you tried to let the air out of the tires? And ultimately, that's what they did. They let the air out of the tires. It dropped the vehicle by about 5 to 6 inches, and it allowed the vehicle to drive right through underneath the bridge. So that's a perfect example of, you've got all these smart people trying to figure out, making lots of money, trying to figure out something that the little boy figured out and really didn't think twice about it, right? Isn't that amazing? So let's talk about ways that you can improve your strategic thinking skills, okay? So one, you could bring that little boy along with you wherever you go. That's one thing you could do, but I didn't put that down. Just thought of that. But really the first time, and I kind of hinted at this before, set dedicated time aside to reflect and plan, identify trends, review the data, prioritize tasks, and determine where to allocate resources. Now you can do that yourself, or you could do that with a group of people, a team, but you need to allocate time. And when I say set aside time, don't just think that you're going to do it later today when you have a free moment. To me, things don't get done unless they get calendared. They have to got to go on your calendar, your Outlook calendar, and dedicate time and make sure that that is kept. Okay, that's important. Number two, uncover your own biases so you can think more clearly about a strategy. So we all have biases in the world. The media sometimes can stir that up. Just conversations with family members or coworkers. I think it's important to realize that most of us all have biases, some stronger than others, some I agree with and some I don't agree with. But regardless of that, you need to realize that you have them, right? And just try to be aware of that so you can think clearer. I think that's an important piece, okay? Because you need to eliminate that to really open your mind into where you need to go. So listen to subject matter experts and opinion leaders in your organization to obtain higher quality information that you can use back into your strategic thinking. So ask lots of questions, okay? Seek lots of data, check the credible resources. It's not everything that you read on the internet is a credible source. It really needs to be true subject matter experts and people that you maybe know, that you trust, that are credible. I think that's important as well. So number four, I can hinted at this before, but ask good questions. Okay, you want to ask good questions. And part of really understanding, we talked about last week, right, is listening, asking good questions, and that's really how you learn and comprehend. Some questions: is this idea from a credible source? Is this idea logical? Is this a win-win? Does this make sense? So those are some things to consider when you're taking a look at improving your strategic skills. Okay, and then the fifth one is explore the consequences of different strategies in different directions. Okay, so there's risk and reward pretty much with everything, and it kind of goes back to what I was hinting about on you want to minimize the resources, the impact of resources. It's not a win at all costs. You want to win the most effectively in efficient way as possible. So I think that's another important point. Okay. So anybody have any questions at this point in time? Any comments you want to leave in the chat box? Go ahead. Allie, any further thoughts from you on strategic thinking skills? Did you like that story about the little boy?
Yeah, I love that. Sometimes it's the younger voices in the room that can they see things in such a different way. So, no,
Yeah.
I really like that a lot. I think it's really interesting what you said about these 5 points with strategic thinking too. I like what you said about calendaring things.
Mhm.
One thing that I think, at least for me, clouds my ability to be more strategic than I'd like to be is I'm always so busy executing that I don't take time to plan. And so when you talked about calendaring, one thing that I have tried to do over the past couple of years is it's on a weekly basis. If nothing else, set 30 minutes aside where it's just uninterrupted. And I just think, right, and do planning. But I find that my results are better if I can find 30 minutes to be able to do that. And I'm actually a little bit more strategic in some of the decisions I make, which help me have better outcomes and be more effective in my way in reaching them.
Yeah.
So I appreciate everything you shared here, but it made me think about like how that's really important too, to prioritize that time.
Yeah. And one other important piece, when you're thinking of setting time aside to reflect and plan, it doesn't always have to be during working hours. It doesn't have to be between 8 and 5. Some of my best thoughts, pop in my mind at different, early in the morning or late at night. To me, my favorite time, there's different ways of doing this. You can set time aside to meditate, you can pray, you could journal. Those are all very effective ways to kind of get your mind in a different gear and get you thinking. But for me, prayer time, incredible thoughts come to me during that time. And sometimes, quickly journal them and write them down. So think about that maybe early in the morning or late at night. And it doesn't need to be long periods of time. It could be something, as little as 5 minutes. But
Yeah.
again, if it is during business hours, I'd highly recommend, put it on your calendar. I think it's a good point.
Yeah. I have one of those toothbrushes. It's on a timer, and I get 2 minutes. And
Oh,
every time before I start brushing my teeth, I think of one topic I want to try to solve in those 2 minutes. It's like a game that I do with myself. But it's really interesting because the timer breaks down in 30-second intervals because you're supposed to move the toothbrush in your mouth. But it is amazing how many things I've been able to think through in 2 minutes.
right, right.
So I don't want to come across as being an advertiser for the toothbrush company, but this is an unpaid endorsement of that toothbrush.
Exactly. No, that's great. Great. So, Allie, let's move into the next section. I want to talk a little bit about vision, right? I think we all agree that vision's important. If any of you want to list what you think vision is or what vision means to you, go ahead and drop that in the chat box. And to me, vision is really the plan of how you're going to accomplish your purpose and your why. Okay. And Allie's going to talk a little bit more about the importance of your why later in today's presentation. And I'll talk a little bit about it and why it's important. Earlier, the strategic thinking, the creativity, and the innovation is really your who and your what. We're going to talk about our why. Okay. Whoops. All right. So I love this quote by Joel Barker about vision. Vision without action is a dream. Action without vision is simply passing the time. And action with vision is making a positive difference. And I think that that's perfect. And it also rings true to me. I'm a visionary. I mean, I'm a paid consultant. I worked with hundreds of business owners all around the country. And we get all the creative juices going and we start talking about all these ideas. But to me, the most important part of what I'm talking about, we talked about creativity and innovation, right, and strategic thinking. But now it's the vision, it's the why, and to me, it's really the plan, and it's the written plan. Okay, and to me, why that's so important is because really, with any type of leadership that you have, you're normally you're working in some type of team. And I've seen it happen time and time again where somebody might have a great idea and they're trying to implement it and they're not very good delegator. They're not very good at motivating their employees or their team members. And they're just trying to do it themselves. And it maybe will ultimately get to where they want to go, but it's a heck of a lot harder and it takes a lot longer than it would have been if they captured that vision, did it in black and white, put it in writing, and then they connected their team to that vision. Is that making sense? So to me, a simple example, and I'm going to talk about some vision planning documents and some other references in the business world. But maybe a good example would be back into your campaign. So many of you are campaign coordinators for your office. You're the volunteer and the point of contact for the Combined Federal Campaign. And to me, one of my favorite documents that we've created in the collateral library for all of you. And if you don't have this, you can either email your zone manager or email Allie and I, and we'll get you a copy. But it's basically the one-page campaign plan. So it's a one-page campaign plan, and it kind of talks about your goals, event ideas, what the historical data, like how many donors, what the revenues, total donations in the past, what your goal is. So it's a real simple document. It's just a one-page campaign document. And to me, that's one of the most important pieces, because that's really the cornerstone of what we're going to ultimately do inside of each of your campaigns, right? So there's a great book. Another book I wanted to reference is from Gino Wickman. I don't know how many, maybe if you've got your camera on, just go ahead and raise your hand, or do a thumbs up emoji in the reaction in the console there. But how many of you read the book Traction? So I heard of it, and somebody sent it to me as a gift. Now, this is a very business book, okay? But it was really fascinating to me, because it's really a structure of growth. And the traction was really, after you create your vision of your organization, how are you going to get traction where the rubber meets the road? That was really the concept. And to me, the whole book premise was, creating your plan, setting your goals, getting everybody connected, and then how are we going to move forward with that? And it's broken down. I'll talk about that in a minute. It's a real easy read. There's a couple different versions of the book. There's Traction was the original book. I read that probably 6-7 years ago. There's the version 2 is called Get a Grip. And then there's a little Cliff Note version, I think, called What the Heck is EOS? And EOS is what they talk about in the book of Traction. It's the entrepreneur's operating system. It's really the recipe, the operating system of successful organizations, okay? So let's talk about one of the key things that it has. So the first step really is to create that one-page plan. In the book, Gino Wickman talks about the Vision Traction Organizer, the VTO. I had been working with small businesses for the past 15 years, and I had a document that I called the one-page business plan. So it's very similar. It was a simple, my joke was it took me 3 pages to explain how to do a one-page business plan. And the exercise, it's a great exercise for any of you that maybe have other side businesses going or other business ventures. Again, if you want a copy, just email Allie and we're happy to send you a copy. But the document I used to use, it was called the one-page business plan. And it's an exercise that you can do by yourself, or you could do with the team. Maybe if you've got a partner in the business or you have other key staff members, but you want to work. I normally liked working as a team because you get great ideas from other people. And there was 4 parts of that. It was your unique selling proposition, what's the vision of the business, and then your why are you doing it? And then what your goals are and what the strategy is. And you try to put that in one page. The book, Gino Wickman had a 2-page and is essentially the same thing. They just asked some more questions. And I just wanted to walk through these 8 questions real quick. Number 1, what are your core values? And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in just a minute, so I won't go into that. What's your core focus? Your core focus is really what your niche is or what your why is. So why do you do this? What is your 10-year target? What's your 3-year target? And what's your 1-year target? Okay. So his encouragement was, where do you want to be in 10 years from now? To me, that's a little bit aggressive forward thinking. In this fast-paced world, it's kind of hard to know what's going to happen next month, yet alone 10 years from now. My thought pattern was more of 12 months at a time. But I like how he took the 10-year, the 3-year, the 1-year, and then broke it down into quarterly goals and priorities. Okay. And I would even encourage, break it down into a month or maybe a week. In all my years of sales, I used to break down my goals by the day. I knew every single day what I was supposed to do. So, you don't need to get that crazy with your numbers, but that's something that you could do with your campaign, for example. And then what's your marketing strategy? And then what are your issues? And your issues are typically what are the obstacles that you're facing and how to overcome them. So that was really this Vision Traction Organizer exercise. And over the past 6 years, I've worked with many more business owners, and we've done these exercises. There was a real big one that I had just done with a large organization out in Southern California. They're a fast-growing company. They're over $200 million in revenue, fast-growing tech company, and they're only 4 years old. So pretty amazing. I won't name names, but I was pretty baffled that they didn't have a business plan. They haven't defined their core values, and a lot of the foundation of what I'm talking about here, they just had a lot of talented people and they were doing really well. So they wanted to create more structure to manage the growth moving forward. So I thought that was awesome. So a couple other quick tips. Project 5 to 10 years in the future. That was really his concept. For me, I like taking a shorter look in time and kind of maybe planning out 1 year. But he wanted to really get the big focus on success, like in 10 years from now, like Colonel Sanders. I want to be a billionaire. Well, that's certainly a big, bold goal. In the plan, use clear, concise language. Infuse your vision statement with passion and emotion. And to me, that's really important. Uh, the vision statement is part of your plan, part of your vision plan. But again, it's really the why. Again, Ali's going to talk about this a little bit more, but I encourage all of you to think about starting with why as it relates back to the campaign or really any venture that you have. It's really a powerful technique, but we'll talk more about that later. Paint a graphical mental picture of what you want and where the business is going. This is a really important piece of leadership, and it's one of Gino's key points in the book. And I agree with this, but you want to paint the picture of where the business is going and how successful you'll be 5 to 10 years from now, because that's what your team is going to connect to. You may have up to this point struggled with a lot of things, and that's not really exciting. People want to know where they're going. They want to be a part of something that's growing and succeeding. Have a plan to communicate your vision statement to others. So I've got many stories. I won't bore everybody to tears with this, but this again is one of the most important points. When you create a plan, you've got to get everybody on board and paint the picture. Regardless, what I would recommend is you could just have a team meeting, and you could either do a PowerPoint presentation or a whiteboard conversation, just jot down things or have a conversation. But people need to connect to where you're going, whatever the plan is. Leaders have the plan. You got to connect your team members to that plan, or it's going to take you forever to get there. And be prepared to commit time and resources to get there. Okay, you didn't build Rome in a day. So I'll close this out here with a couple final slides on vision. But the EOS wheel, this is what they talk about in the book. The wheel itself there's an exercise, the vision traction organizer. I just talked about that. That's the 8 questions. You create your plan, and then you've got to share it to everybody. Everybody's got to be singing the same song. The people element, you've got to have the right people in the right seats. This is an exercise. It's really interesting to do these exercises, but whatever your core values are in the organization, you basically map either people, they resemble these core values or they don't. It's kind of cut and dry. Maybe sometimes they do, but the people analyzer exercise is each person in the team, and you take a look at each one of, integrity might be one, honesty, innovation, creativity. Those are examples of core values. Do your team members, do they resemble those core values? And it's really a yes or no. And as the leader or the coach of the team, you always want to have the right players in the right seats. That's what that whole exercise is all about. And then there's a couple other questions that are part of that exercise as well, but I won't go into that. To me, another important part is the data, the scorecards, the measurables. I don't know. I played sports my whole life, and I also was a finance major in college. So I just love numbers. I love statistics. I love reviewing that. And I think it's important that when you put together your plan, that you have something, a measuring stick, and you need to make it transparent or visible to everybody and share what those goals are. So if you have a campaign in your office and your goal's $15,000, share the weekly report with everybody in the office to capture them to where you want to go. There's an old quote I'd heard a long time ago, and I love it. What is measured improves. Okay, so what's measured improves, because you're showing everybody in the organization that that's important. It's important enough for you to measure that. So the scorecards, I think, are a really important piece. And kind of closing this out, the process is really, what's the process of rolling out the plan? It might be a 4-step or a 5-step process. Just want to make that crystal clear to the team and followed by all. Everybody's going to have issues, and you just need to plan for that. And the idea that Gina Wickman had in the book is you have a weekly meeting where you talk about the goals. Are you on track? Yes or no? That's the bottom part of this graphic. The traction where the rubber meets the road is rocks mean goals. And then the meetings, there's a weekly meeting frequency where you're going to update everybody. The majority of that time, they're basically talking about issues. You know, what obstacles or issues do we have in front of us? What's holding us back? And the IDS is really a 3-step process to identify, discuss, and solve that issue. So you check it off the list and you can kind of move on. So that's really the intentions of that process. But this is a very popular business book and process. And I have a lot of experience with that. So I just wanted to share that with you. So kind of back to the importance of numbers. I'm a big football fan. Vince Lombardi, there's a great quote: if winning isn't everything, why do they keep score? Right? So to me, that's the motivation. Like if you're on a diet and you want to lose 10 pounds, I don't want to get on the scale once a month or once a quarter. I want to know how I'm doing every day. I'd check it out every day, or at least every week. So you've got a fighting chance to stay motivated and inspired. So to me, it makes it fun. That's part of my why, because I like keeping score. I like tracking things with the intentions of improving and making it better. Okay. So I'm going to close out my last section, and then I'll hand things off to Allie for a little bit more. But I just wanted to talk about the importance of core values. What do core values look like? And core values are an important part of the plan. I used that one example of that fast-growing technology company. They hadn't been through the exercise, and they hadn't had the time dedicated to create the core values. But core values are really a timeless set of guiding principles, and it's something that's often neglected in agencies or in offices or in businesses. Normally, the rule of thumb is there's just a few core values, typically between 3 and 7 as a rule of thumb. They resemble the leaders of the organization. And normally, if you look at the core values of any big famous company, typically it's the leadership, it's you that make up what these core values are, and the core values of the organization, and you're really the mantle. So those two should really closely resemble one another. They define the behaviors that you're expected from one another. So frequently, maybe of who you're recruiting, and if you're recruiting someone into the team and they don't really demonstrate and resemble those core values that you have, then I would question, why are we looking at hiring this person? Again, it's kind of back to the guiding principles comment that I made a minute ago, right? So they define the culture of who fits in and who doesn't. Okay, that's really important. In one of the organizations that I had, the last one that I had built up and sold, we actually had this, I called it a culture of success and a culture of accountability, where we had all of our goals were transparent. I had 7 core values that were listed in the lobby of our building and up in our boardroom, and they were up in frames. And we did a lot of business with the government, and so we had name badges. And on the back of the card was all 7 of the core values. And to make it a little corny, I thought it would be fun. Once a month, we actually had an all hands meeting where everybody met. And the prior month, if anybody saw any demonstration of any of those 7 core values, they were to write it down and give it to the HR person or put it on a board inside the lunchroom. And then we would gather all those up and we would just raffle and give away things to reinforce the good behavior of employees that were demonstrating the core values. So that was a way that I used to cheerlead good behavior and motivate people to continue to do it. Okay. So one last thing I wanted to talk about is really an attitude of gratitude. And an attitude of gratitude to me is that positive outlook that looks at things as opportunities, not problems or burdens. And I think it's such an important piece, super important piece of being a leader. Remember the comment I said last week, maybe one of the homework items where I want you to try to, for one day, never admit that you're tired, angry, or bored at the office. Okay. Subconsciously, we're always, oh, I'm tired, or you're yawning, or you're complaining about something. That's not the attitude of gratitude. And again, it's a lot harder than you think, but I just want to share something really simple with you. It's one simple word to make such a big difference and give you that attitude of gratitude. Because I think, again, it's really important from leadership standpoint. You'll people would admire and respect you more, I think, if you had that positive outlook and that attitude of gratitude. But what I wanted to share with you is here, listen to these comments, and there's one word in specifically that I want to talk about. But you have to wake up early for work. You have to go work out. You have to make that sales call. You have to go to this meeting. You have to make your family dinner, or you have to go to your son's baseball game. Okay, now let me change one word and say, I get to wake up early for work. I get to go to that meeting. I get to make that sales call. I get to make my family dinner, or I get to go to my son's baseball game. See that one word? And it's in today's world, subconsciously, we don't realize it, but there's so much hustle bustle. It always feels like to me that we're always trying to justify how busy we are. Okay. So again, think of how you could change one word and say that I get to instead of I have to, because it's really a blessing of all the things that we get to do instead of things that we have to do, right? It's awesome that we have a family. It's awesome that we get to make them dinner or go to a sporting event, or that we have a job, because there's many that don't, right? So I wanted to leave you with that. There's another great book that really talks about that. I don't have to, I get to. It's a great book by James Clear. That's called Atomic Habits. So for those of you that are in a book club or love to read, I'd encourage you to check that book out as well. Okay. So there's two most important words to me in business. It's thank you. The most important word is we, and the least important word is I. Again, Terry Morgan, one of the LFCC members here in Zone 12, Heart of the Midlands. I always love the quotes that he has on his email signature line. And, I remember, I think I made a comment of this last week that, leaders eat last. And he really talks about, being the servant heart. And this is another servant heart quote where it's really talking about the power of we as a team. We together are going to do this instead of I, it's we, right? Okay. So Allie, I'm going to hand it back to you to talk about value-based services to the community.
Okay, thank you, James. So many connections with what James presented today. So I'm going to take us back a few slides back, right, with a few things that James said. And so starting with the most recent one where James says, I get to do this. Right? There are a lot of people who want to be able to give back to the community some way, right? Paying it forward. There was some sort of blessing in their life and they want to be able to do it. They just can't find time to do it. And so through the CFC, right, you all have this amazing opportunity to be able to do that while you're at work. And so what we're hoping is to give you some ideas on, particularly in these times when things are so challenging, right, to rise up in that leadership role. But I'm also hoping that you'll be able to look around and in other parts of your life, right, find ways to be in community. And so a lot of this has to do with who we are. So James, if you'll go to the next slide. Thank you, sir.
There we go.
All right. So I love that we've already made some references to busy. So just to put some levity to it, I decided to add my own quote in today. I'm so busy doing what I'm doing that I forgot why I'm doing it. Right.
Right.
So I'm curious, how many of you feel like you're in that hamster wheel sometimes, right? And you're just doing, 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 doing. And so maybe we were talking about taking time to plan or taking one, but I can't tell you, I love constant me, 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 me. So I just feel like there are times when I'm just spinning in a wheel and I even forgot like, why I drove someplace or why I signed up to do something or why, because I didn't take the time to think about my why, or has my why changed?
Right.
Right. So this comes back to the why piece, because if I take some time to really focus on why I do things, then I know how and what, right? It becomes a little more clear to me. So one of the things I have not shared with you all is that for a long time, I served as the executive director of the CASA program, Court Appointed Special Advocates here in St. Louis County. I served as the executive director for 12 years. And prior to that, I was the development director. So that's part of my fundraising background that I have. And why, when you believe in something, it's very easy for you to raise money, right? Because it doesn't feel like you're raising money. You're supporting something you really believe in. And so when James was talking about vision, right, one of the things that for those of us who've worked with children in the foster care system, we want to be able to have this vision of one day where there is no child that's abused or neglected ever again. Right? Because if there is no abuse or neglect for children and youth, then we don't have to have a CASA program, right? I wanted to put the organization out of business. And so, how do I do that? Right? That's a very audacious vision statement. And so, when you're thinking about your why and your vision, I don't know that it needs to be as far reaching as something like that. James was talking about the 5-10 years, and I was chuckling because I thought about my CASA experience and I thought, man,
Yeah.
if we could eliminate child abuse or neglect in 5 to 10 years, like my work would be done. I could just rest. But I know that that's probably not going to happen, right? That is probably not going to happen. So when you think about from a community service perspective, one of the things that I want to challenge you with is not only think about what motivates you and what you care about, but to what end, right? Would you be able to come up with a statement as audacious as, I want to put an end to child abuse and neglect, right? Because when you start to think about it in that way, you start to think about then all these steps that you do to get there, and you become a little bit more strategic in your thinking, right? So, for example, I remember, and it's funny that I've been coming up with these memories lately. I was because I have been involved with the program, was involved with the program for so long. I was recently contacted by the National CAS Association. They're doing a special project, and because I worked for the organization for so long, they asked me if I would provide some quotes and offer some old pictures. And so over the weekend, I was digging up some really old pictures. When your kids look at the pictures, they go, "Wow, mom, you looked really young back then." You're like, "Yeah, that was before I had you." That was my response. But anyway, yeah. But it, I had pictures that I'd seen where we were doing a giving tree, where we were collecting gifts for children in foster care. The kids had put down their wishes on ornaments, and we were at the Toys R Us, at the grocery store, we had giving trees all over the St. Louis region, and people were purchasing toys and they were providing them for kids in foster care. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, right? So when I think about the how or the what, that could absolutely be my why, right? But if I'm going to push it a little bit further and say, okay, while that gift probably made a huge difference for that holiday season for that child who received it, if my goal is to put an end to child abuse or neglect, how far does that gift take me? Right. And so we go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a basic need, so depending on what some of the needs, some of the gifts, you'd be surprised, they were very much basic, right? I'm looking for a stocking cap. I'm looking for some new socks, right? I'm looking for, and so many of the gifts were very basic needs. They weren't anything elaborate. Kids weren't asking for PlayStations, right? And 6 games to go along with them. They were looking for some very basic things. But if I'm thinking about my why and what those steps are to that, I would begin with buying a toy, right? Or fulfilling one of those wishes. But hopefully over time it progresses and I do a little bit more with that. And so that's what we're hoping that through the rest of the challenge, right? We start to shift a little bit and do that kind of thinking. All right, James, next slide, please. All right, so we have talked a lot about the why statement. And one of the things then, if you look at this slip of paper to the left, would you be able to actually fill that out? right? So as we've already said, why statements is a sentence that clearly expresses your unique contribution and impact. The contribution is the primary action that you take towards making your impact. Right? So again, thinking primary. So depending on what I would state, I can make lots of meals, right, and deliver them to people who need them. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if I am interested in abolishing hunger so that no one is ever hungry again, I'm going to be making a lot of meals for a really long time. And I could probably get my neighbors and friends to make meals too, but I don't know that we're going to abolish hunger. Right. So again, how audacious is that goal? Hopefully over time it evolves. We have to start somewhere, but that's kind of the path where I'm hoping that you all will start to move your thinking. The impact reflects the difference you want to make in the world. So again, I'm not trying to say that the many ornaments over the years that I worked at CASA, that I fulfilled those gifts, that it didn't make an impact, because I truly think that for that young person, it did that holiday season, right? But when I think about in the world, the difference, right? There's probably, I can do that and I can probably do something else. I don't want to give up buying the gifts. It makes me feel good. It makes me happy. Still want to do that, but there's probably more I can do because I'm learning more. I understand more why children are abused and neglected. Right? When I first learned about it, I thought, oh, that's a horrible thing. Why would that happen? I was intellectually curious. I learned about it, right? And so over time, I began to understand the circumstances of why children are abused and neglected. And I found other ways, in addition to buying gifts, right, on how I could help address that. And so together, these two components provide a filter through which you can make decisions and act with purpose. Right? So again, just something as simple as, if I could answer that question, right, how profound would that be for me? And that goes back to the why, the how, and the what. All right, James, next slide, please. Okay, so some of the questions that we want to ask ourselves, if we actually want to make that jump, is we want to think about where we are today, where do we want to be, and how do we get there? Right, so again, it's thinking about this in a very curious sort of way. So if I think about hunger, right, where are we today? If we look at the statistics, and depending on where you live across the country, it's actually pretty surprising, how many people are hungry, how many children are born into poverty every year. And so I would encourage you to look those statistics up, because you might be surprised on what those look like. Right. But if you look at those statistics, so this is where, when James was talking about being data oriented, right? If I understand what those numbers are and I want to make a change. So in some cases, depending on the issue, I want the numbers to increase. I want there to be more of something. And in some cases, I want there to be less of something. Right. So when I think about trying to put a measurement to it, so James was talking about, if you measure, let's see, what was your quote, James? You said something about, if you don't measure it,
Yeah, what's measured improves.
What's measured improves. Right. So again, if I go back to thinking about the good work I'm doing, the service that I'm providing, if there's no measurement to it, right, how do I know that it's making a difference? One of the projects that I got to work on here in the St. Louis area was, I worked on for 18 months with a team of about 30 people. We worked on a 16 county region-wide community needs assessment for the United Way. And one of the things that we learned was that there is over $3 billion coming into the St. Louis region on an annual basis, right? That's being funneled through the federal government, through private donations, et cetera, right? To address the top 5 needs that we have in the St. Louis region. Some of it was poverty, some of it was jobs, some of it was housing. So again, very much basic needs. But when we looked at the trend line for where those numbers were over the past 5 years, we didn't see a lot of movement. So people started to ask, what in the world are you doing with billions of dollars then for this many consecutive years, if we're not seeing a drastic move, the needle move on those numbers? Right. And so the conclusion that we came to was, we broke it down to systemically. Right. Systemically, we weren't coordinating and cooperating enough with each other to be able to make a difference with the billions of dollars that we were receiving. And so it's fascinating when we started to look at other markets across the country, because it wasn't just St. Louis where we were starting to see these numbers. We actually saw this in a lot of other places as well. So when we think about, if we were to be successful on what the ideal future state is, right? And then going to these existential questions about, why do we exist? That's not so much, humankind, but it's to thinking about why an organization exists or why a problem exists. Right. And then to think about, if you were to be famous for actually addressing that. So if you wanted to be some of these names that we talked about earlier with the innovators, right? Would we actually be able to do that from a service perspective and be able to stamp, get rid of hunger? I almost said stamp out hunger for that. So that's a shout out for you guys who work for the Postal Service, because that has stuck with me, stamping out hunger. But what do you want to be famous for, right? So just really something to think about when you do your why. And again, this can change over time. We all have to start somewhere, but I
Ellie,
want to encourage you to think that way.
yeah, I love that comment. What do you want to be famous for?
Mm-hmm.
That I love that.
Yeah. And nobody said that I had to be a Colonel Sanders, right? And famous for that. But there are lots of people in our lives who are famous within where we worship, who are famous within our neighborhood, who are famous at a school that we attended, or, there is some group of people that even with that, you're famous for something, right?
Mhm.
And so that's very powerful to think about how you might play a leadership role in guiding that. All right. Next slide, please, James. Okay, so our mindset then on all of this, like, really truly does matter. Your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny. And so this is where we really want folks to understand then when you think about what those values, beliefs are, right? If you start there, so James was calling them core values, right? But if you really understand what those are for you and you start to build everything from that, you're actually going to be able to answer why in a much stronger way. All right. Next slide, please, James.
Okay.
All right. So I'm just curious, and I would love to see in the chat box here, how many of you, if you were to be asked, like, so James talked about for his company, they had, did you say 7, James?
7 core values, yes.
Yeah, so I'm curious for each of us as individuals, would we be able to name 7 values that we believe are core to each of us, right? And we can be honest and just let me know in the chat box. You don't have to name what they are, but like if you were put on the spot, you had to say, so what are your values, Stephanie, right? Or Cindy, or Melissa, or Lindsay, right? So there are some of you who are able to answer
Cindy.
it very quickly.
Yeah, that's good. It's
Yeah.
hard to think of maybe coming up with 7, maybe 3, 4, 5.
Mm-hmm.
Cindy had 5 that she lives by. Love that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe three or so, 3 to 4. Once you start jotting them down, there more will come to you.
Exactly. So one of the things that I'm going to send in the Friday follow-up email is a link, or actually several links, to a few of these core value quizzes. So there was one that I took that was really fascinating because I think I know what my core values are. But when I took this quiz just for the heck of it, as I was preparing for today, I was actually surprised the exercise. So that was one of the quizzes, but I'll put those in there. And if you have that quiz took me about 15 minutes. But it actually like put 2 different values and it would have to compete between each other, and I'd have to choose one or the over the other. And it was actually kind of tough for me as I got into minute 9, minute 11, minute 13. It was getting pretty hard for me because they were trying to prioritize that for me for a short list, right? But it was tough. But I'm going to put that in the follow up, and I encourage you, if you feel pretty settled on what your values are, fantastic. If you're wondering, because we all evolve as people, right? I have found that my top 10 have probably shifted in order of priority for me over the years, right? Depending on
Good
what's
point.
happened to me over time, and my family and my friends and the world around me. But I'm going to put that in there because you might find it really interesting. All right. Yep. Cindy relates to me. Mine have definitely shifted over the years. Thank you for that. All right. And when we reflect on then what's happened in 2020, there may be some stuff that we're looking around and that's impacting how we think about things, right? So whether it's coronavirus or the economic crisis, I mentioned today in an earlier call. So for those of you, you all know that James is a zone manager. Right? I co-lead a zone, the Gateway Zone, with my colleague out of Kansas City. But we were talking about the work that we were doing as zone managers. And I had shared that, I think I have shared with all of you that I'm an adjunct professor in addition to the work that I do with Gateway, and in addition to some of the, I like James, I'm also a consultant, but I also teach. I've been teaching for 5 years at the graduate level, and I was furloughed. And I have never in my life been furloughed, laid off. And so I have a whole new appreciation, right, for folks. I will not forget that moment when I got told that they were canceling a bunch of classes because they just didn't have the funds, right? Because they had been impacted so heavily from the spring of last year when they shut down the university. They did not have the funds, and they had a lot of students who said, I'm going to put my education on pause. We're not doing learning in person. I hate this virtual learning thing. I'm going to take a year off, right? So the university furloughed all of us who were adjunct professors. I mean, hundreds of us. So, so that was really interesting for me because I have been pretty blessed in my life and had not had that happen to me. But, surprisingly, in my close family, there are 4 of us who either got furloughed or laid off, right? And so I'm experiencing that on a firsthand level. And then social justice, right? So as we look around and we see the demonstrations that are happening and people, speaking into what has been going on for a long time in this country, or for some, that's new to them and they're just learning about it. These are opening our eyes to new conversations that perhaps we've never had before. And then I just said the +1, right? There's probably lots of other things that are going on for you. Where things are happening in your community and it's causing you to think about maybe what your values, your beliefs, and your priorities are. So, all right, next slide, please, James. Okay, so I've asked James to put a Zoom quiz together for me, and there's going to be 3 questions. And so we will see, James is going to pull those up. If you're calling in, you will probably have a difficult time with participating in these, but I'll read them out loud. All right, so there's 3 questions. We're going to start off with the 1. And so you're going to make a guess on what you believe the mission statement is that matches with the organization, right? So for this first question, the mission statement is to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors. Do you think that's the mission statement for the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, or the United Way?
So lots of Red Cross, 1 Salvation Army.
We have some in the chat.
Coming in on chat, yeah.
Yeah, so there's 4 in the chat who are saying Red Cross, right? United Way. All right. Awesome. And then James, for those who finished, let's go on to number 2. And so folks can start responding to that. So if you, you may need to scroll up a little bit. So if you're working on the computer. So the second question is to improve lives by mobilizing the caring power of communities around the world to advance the common good. Same 3 selection, Red Cross, Salvation Army, or United Way. And then if you've gotten through that, and I see some of you have already started with the 3rd one. The 3rd mission statement is to preach the gospel and meet human needs without discrimination. Again, the same 3 choices, Red Cross, Salvation Army, or United Way. And then James, if you'll help me watch kind of when the results kind of seem to stabilize, and we'll let you do the big reveal. Let us know what the answers are.
I'll give it about 5-10 more seconds. Go ahead and post your answers, and then I'll share the poll in just about 5 more seconds. Okay. All right, so here we go. Can you see that?
Sharing poll results. Yes. Okay. So the answer to the first one, to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors, 81% said Red Cross, 7% Salvation Army, 11% United Way. And so the correct answer is the Red Cross.
Yep.
All right. In the second one, to improve lives by mobilizing the caring power of communities around the world to advance the common good. And so 81%, so that's really interesting. Exactly the same number as the first one, 22 of you, 81% said United Way. And that is correct. It is the United Way. All right. So depending on how you take multiple choice questions, by process of elimination, if you think that way, number three, to preach the gospel and meet human needs without discrimination, the Salvation Army is the
Right.
correct answer at 85%. Yeah.
Okay.
So I shared that with you because if we were to break down the words in each of those mission statements, I mean, there were a number of us who were like, I actually think it could be this organization, right? So there's a few key words that might give it away on which organization it belongs to. And it also depends on how familiar you are with those particular organizations. But you'll see that almost like to a certain degree, one of those mission statements could have been the mission statement for another one of those organizations, right? So they were pretty darn close. This person to, I'm not sure, it says Ockenfeld's STP. This person in the chat box says sharing the gospel was telling. Yeah, I
Right.
agree. That was probably a spoiler alert right there for the Salvation Army. But to say, if we took preach the gospel out and we wrote to meet human needs without discrimination, right? Would it be the Red Cross? Could it be the United Way? Yeah, maybe, could be. Right. So my whole point in doing that, so I'm going to go ahead and keep going. James, if you'll move to the next slide, please.
Okay.
Thank you. My whole point in sharing that with you is, there's a lot of mission statements with organizations that you can take a look at what those are. And generally speaking, nonprofit organizations are going to make their mission statements broad enough, right? So it's probably not going to be as visionary as, we're going to eradicate hunger, because that's really tough to do, right? We were talking about systems level work with some of the United Way research that I had done earlier this year and last year. And so, many nonprofit organizations know that it's really hard to do something like that on your own, right? To end child abuse would be really tough for the CASA program to do on its own because it focuses on one particular segment of the child welfare system, right? Not the entire system. So it takes this cooperation of lots of organization and also lots of people. So when you're thinking about aligning your time, talent, and treasure, right, to your values, one of the things that I love that the CFC campaign does is we do this cause of the week list, right? So in addition to at the end of the week or early each week, right, there's we do like a cause week email that goes out that shows you how you can, not only for yourself, but for others, whether they're your key workers or their other colleagues. I've even shared some of these with people I know who have, they aren't involved with the combined federal campaign, but they find the content really interesting, to learn about hunger, human rights, poverty, medical research, right? And the list goes on. I mean, I don't know, how many is that? 15 weeks worth. There's one that takes you through every week of the campaign. And so in addition to that, on Tuesdays, you have the opportunity to go into conversation about some of these issue areas. So there's experts who are able to speak into it, and there's people just like you and me who we may know a lot or we may know very little, right? But we want to be able to have a conversation about it and figure out, how do I want to align my time, talent, and treasures? And I would encourage you. I mean, there's so many good causes out there. There are absolutely so many, but I really encourage you in figuring out your why is to align those with your values, right? Because otherwise you're going to be doing, and you're not going to know where you're going. And at the end of the day, you're going to wonder, did I really make a difference? All right. Next slide, please, James. And so if you haven't had a chance to do this, right, we want you to make sure that you explore this. This is actually off of the OPM giving website that we have for the combined federal campaign. And so I think it was in last week's weekly email, but it was one of the take action, but we encouraged you to look at the select a specific category and kind of get to know some of these different issue areas that the cause weeks feature. And then, if you find these organizations, go to their website, right? Check out their mission statement, but take a look at how those align with your values. And on Thursday during the discussion, we're actually going to dig into that a little bit more, right? Trying to figure out what the values are, because now we want you to be able to motivate and inspire others. They don't have to adopt the same causes that are important to you, right? But we want folks to go through a similar process where they understand what's important to them. And then from a larger community issue, how so many of these intersect and how the combined federal campaign helps them do that. But you're going to have to lead them through that, right? Because this is actually a little more complicated than folks understand it to be.
Yep.
All right, James, next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to hand it back over to you so you can wrap up for the day.
Great. So just kind of a wrap up for the day. We talked about the leadership development portion. So both Allie and I shared some content on that. And then we closed things out by talking about the value-based service to the community. So next steps, we'll be meeting again this Thursday. So today is Tuesday because of the holidays. So we had our session 2. The next session will be the discussion implementation. That's 1 p.m. on the 5th. So looking forward to seeing everybody then. For everybody that actually completes next week, you'll get your first level certification. I'll put you on my list and we'll get that out to you. But it's my hope that you feel that this is valuable content and you want to stay connected and actually go through the next 3. I'm not going to spoil the fun, but the 5th week is really easy. So, but we've got 3 more weeks after this to go through, and I hope that you complete the 5-week challenge, and then you'll get your leadership mastery certification as well. And then, as always, Allie will send out a reminder email on Friday morning, just kind of the weekly summary and what we're going to be talking about for next week. Okay. So that's a wrap, Allie. Thank you so much. Great job. If anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. There's our contact information. Or if you want any of the additional attachments that we shared with you, feel free to email or give us a call. But have a great rest of the day, everybody, and we'll see you on Thursday. Okay. Thank you.